Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth. Joe Biden and the U.S. Congress have signed the Respect for Marriage Act, which makes LGBT marriages legal in all 50 states. It is the law of the land. Joe Biden signed the law, and everybody was smiling about it. This is one of the very, very few laws that was passed not because something had been done, but because they wanted to prevent something that might happen in the future. See, with practically every other law, it's in response to something that's already happened. This was taken up as a preventative measure. And the main reason that it was done was to make sure that the Dobbs Supreme Court ruling can't be reversed. Because you have people like Clarence Thomas saying that that's what these right-wingers intended to do. They're going to revisit the Dobbs decision. And the Democrats wanted to make sure that the Supreme Court's gay marriage ruling couldn't be overturned. And what was the response of Biden and the Democrats? All smiles. All of a sudden, Washington works because they had like a dozen or so senators who also went for it as well. And let's be clear, this law went from being a suggestion back in June, right after the Supreme Court reversed Roe v. Wade, and here we are just 6 months later, and you now have a national law with bipartisan support. All of a sudden, the filibuster is not a problem. Isn't that what the Democrats scream on everything? Oh, we can't get anything done. The filibuster, the filibuster, the filibuster. Oh, the Republicans, they've gone over the top when it comes to the extremism. And yet, for some reason, you had like a dozen senators from the Republican Party who went along with signing this into law. They supported it. They voted for it. All of a sudden, the GOP isn't quaking in fear of their base. They're not scared of the rubes out there who cling to their Bibles and guns. All of a sudden, they can go ahead and vote like they're in California or something. And notice that this law got signed right after the midterms. That's when it got passed. These laws take months, if not years, to negotiate in both houses of Congress. And for at least a dozen Republicans who supported it, it tells you they've been on board with this since the very beginning. Biden didn't just talk them into it in the last few months. These guys were already supportive of this before now. But Biden and the Democrats, they didn't push for a Senate vote until after the midterms were over. See, they already knew that the Democrat-controlled House would support this law, so the emphasis was going to be on getting Republicans to support it as well. And you see how fast it flew through the U.S. Senate. That thing just zipped right through. So what does that tell you? There was already a backroom deal about this long before the midterm election took place. And the entire point of the backroom deal was make it clear, oh, the Susan Collins and the Mitt Romneys and others, they were supportive of this, but just don't make it uncomfortable with this. Wait until after the midterms are over. That way we don't have to have any sort of political price that gets paid when a lot of our own voters wonder why we supported it. Memories are short. They'll get over it in time. But the Republicans were already on board with it. Just wait until after the midterms so that the GOP doesn't have it as a major issue against them. And that tells you that people like Mitch McConnell basically gave a wink and a nod to it. In only 6 months, the Democrats went from fretting about the Supreme Court repealing gay marriage to making it the law of the land. And this law was written because there's a lot of LGBT donors who give big political donations. People like Ed Buck, the longtime Clinton buddy and serial killer who murdered numerous black men. Speaking of black men, Don Lemonade, of course, was on the air, and he made sure that he brought his lifestyle partner with him so he could show everybody at home, see, hey, when you think of this law, you should think about me. This guy's doing his virtue signaling and trying to score political points. He wants people to be looking at him. He never seems to understand that this is not about black people. He doesn't even like black people. He's probably told himself that because he's a gay man in an interracial relationship, that this law is doubly relevant to him. He certainly would like everybody to think so. Why, it was written just for Don Lemonade. And Robin Roberts will be telling herself the same thing, and they're both wrong. The reason that this law passed, the reason that it was written, was for the exact same reason that Loving v. Virginia was successful in the courts. Because there's white people who wanted this to happen. They didn't want any restrictions on their freedoms. The only way this benefits you as a black person is if you're in a relationship with a white one. This is white supremacy all day. And no, the claptrap about how this is meant to protect interracial marriage, that's a lie. They already knew that if they said that this is just about LGBT marriage, there would be a heck of a lot more opposition against it. So instead, they decide, well, we're going to piggyback on interracial marriage as well. And what we're going to say is that we're actually trying to do something more. It's not just about LGBT rights. This is about rights in general. It's about a whole lot of people. When in fact, it's not. Absolutely nobody in their right mind seriously believes that Clarence Thomas, the most self-centered person on the Supreme Court, is actually going to vote should a lawsuit come their way. He would actually, one, entertain such a lawsuit. Do you really believe that Clarence Thomas would actually say, yeah, we should consider this, we should consider a ruling on it? And two, even if he did, does anyone truly believe that Clarence Thomas, who is married to a white woman, would actually hand down a ruling saying, yeah, we need to go ahead and make it where interracial marriage can be completely and thoroughly left up to the states? Anyone believe that Clarence Thomas, of all people, would go along with that? This is a man who doesn't let anybody disagree with him for any reason. And speaking of Uncle Thomas, Biden said that back in June, Clarence Thomas and his big mouth was the entire reason that the Democrats needed to hurry up and pass a law to protect gay marriage. Because Clarence Thomas was running his mouth saying that after the Roe v. Wade reversal, well, gee, it's time to revisit that Dobbs ruling too. That one probably needs to be revisited too. And we know why. Clarence Thomas was feeling his oats. And he wanted to let the left know that all their judicial issues were in his crosshairs. He did it as a means to tee them up. As far as he was concerned, we're going to own the left for the day. Well, this wasn't about the judiciary for him. This was about settling old scores and getting even with the people who had humiliated him 30 years ago. But as with so many other things, Clarence Thomas is finding out the hard way that he would have been far better off if he had just stayed quiet, if he had pretended to respect past judicial precedents, and just not say anything about the Roe v. Wade reversal, say, well, circumstances are very different now than they were in the 70s, blah, 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 whatever. He could go ahead and just say, of course, we respect stare decisis. If judicial rulings handed down, we got to make sure that the laws have integrity. It can't just be one thing one day and another thing the next. He could go ahead and do that claptrap and then turn around the next day and reverse the Dobbs decision all the same. But like all these right-wingers, Uncle Thomas has a fundamental weakness of character that compels him to declare his evil plans like some James Bond villain. And like a James Bond villain, Clarence Thomas has been foiled. All those people who he thought that he was going to put the fear of God into, he scared them all right, scared them into action. But they were not acting on the behalf of black people. Biden has categorically ignored black people, but now that there's something that a non-black constituency wants, he shamelessly decides that he's going to use, or rather misuse, abuse is actually the word I should be using, the experience of black people in this country, and turn it into a stalking horse to get support for something that he knew that he would have a far, far harder time trying to pass without it. But of course, this nothing burger wouldn't be complete without the Democrats' mascots, the congressional black talkers, weighing in. They're concerned about a lot of things, like police violence against black people, voting rights. Not one of those things has come to fruition, by the way. No matter the CBC's lofty promises to the black community, the Democrats can't get anything done for black folks because there's just not enough support. It's the filibuster, you see. Oh, D.C. is so polarized. Why, there's gridlock. Meanwhile, pass that gay marriage bill, we're going ahead and sign that. Zip just flew right through. See, when you talk about punishing the police, you're mentioning things that black people would be the beneficiaries of. It would be very difficult to try to shoehorn everybody into that one. So the Respect for Marriage Act is like affirmative action. White people will be the primary beneficiaries of it, but they'll claim that, there's a few black folks who are in relationships with these white beneficiaries, and it might apply to them as well. They're kind of getting some of the side benefit of it, depending on who they're with. It's the same old game that if black people get something from a particular policy, that everybody has to get something too. In fact, it must be changed so that non-black people become the primary beneficiaries, and black people might perhaps get some minor benefit from it somewhere down the road, but it won't apply to very many black people, and the benefits won't amount to very much. And speaking of things that don't amount to very much, Negro Jim Clyburn, America's favorite sharecropper, was leading the charge to cheerlead this law being passed. And he repeated the lie that interracial couples will be safe because of this. See, that's what he was told to say. Joe Biden told him, just make sure you mention interracial couples, because everybody knows there's a whole bunch of swirlers and intersectionalists out there. And Negro Jim Clyburn said, well, you're so right, boss. You're so right. I'm going to tell them this is good for everybody. So much for stop sloganizing, huh, nigga Jim? So let's recap. Last year, there was unanimous support from Biden and both houses of Congress for the Asian hate crime bill. He got that done in his first 5 months in office. This year, he's got the gay marriage law passed. Only took 6 months to pull that off. He's getting all this done in his first term. No talk about, well, you guys, I gotta get reelected first. He didn't tell the Asian community, I gotta get reelected, man. I mean, you gotta be reasonable, man. I gotta get reelected. Doesn't do any good for us to pass a law and then we become a one-term presidency. We need all 8 years to get things done. They're not telling that to everybody else. They didn't tell the LGBT community, well, that's too controversial. Making gay marriage the law of the land is one thing to have a Supreme Court ruling on it, because, the judges are unelected and they don't have to worry about getting reelected next year or the year after. But we do, politicians do, so it's too controversial. The country's just not ready. They didn't say that. They said oh no, we're going to go ahead and get this done. We're going to have a bunch of Republicans who sign off on it too. They're not telling everybody else what they can't do. Everybody else shows up and they're not being told the filibuster's too big a hurdle to get over. Asian hate crime bill, why, that's too controversial. We need to have one that covers everybody. Gay marriage law, well, too controversial. That would be really unpopular. You don't see James Carville and the rest of the walking garbage talking about how, if we do something like this is going to galvanize them folks in the red states. We don't need to be doing that. We need to be real careful. You got these extremists. You got these people on the fringe pushing for all this stupid stuff that's going to cost us elections. The only time they ever mention any nonsense about a policy that you're demanding is going to cost us the election, the only time they talk about that is if it's something that black people are advocating for. Then all of a sudden, well, that's going to cost us the election. But very interesting how the Democrats discover their spine and their nerve for anyone except for black people. So last year was the Asian hate crime bill. This year is the gay marriage law. I think it won't be very long before there's some sort of amnesty for illegal aliens. That DHS notice that I told you about a couple of days ago, notice how, like a little checklist, here the Democrats are going through their list of people who they want political support from. And they're showing that they're going to be doing things for them, but what they haven't done is anything for black people. The closest that Biden has come to doing anything for black folks was his do-nothing, pointless executive order that basically gave some suggestions for what federal law enforcement ought to do, but there's no real demands. But it's an executive order, and as we all know, people have been telling Biden from the jump to use executive orders to get this or that done. And Biden has vehemently refused to just go on an orgy of executive orders, at least not as far as big things are concerned. He'll do it with small stuff, but not for anything big. And what was the reason that Biden gave for not using executive orders to do the big important things? He said he didn't want to use executive orders to do big stuff because the next Republican president could simply repeal the executive order. He said that when it comes to the really big stuff, he wants to get legislation passed. And that's exactly what he's done. So the Asians get legislation, the LGBT community gets legislation, and black people, the bone of the Democratic Party, the people who put Biden in the White House, get an executive order, which, as Biden himself pointed out, can and will be reversed by the very next Republican who gets into the White House. And that tells you everything you need to know about the Democratic Party's policies and Biden's own commitment to the black community. So much for I've got your backs. I've got the black community's backs. They've had my back and I've got your... Yeah, so much for that, huh? In the next few months, the primary season will start. And at some point, Biden's going to have to make his pitch for why black folks need to come back and support him again for 4 more years. Just remember, when it comes time to talk about what he's done for the black folks who put him in office, for the Asians, he'll talk about the hate crime laws. For the LGBT community, he's going to talk about the Respect for Marriage Act. He'll say he was the president who made gay marriage the law of the land. And for black people, he'll talk about an executive order he signed. Oh, he'll also be sure to mention that Juneteenth was made into a federal holiday. This way, government bureaucrats like Biden can take the day off. Oh, and he'll also say that he made Ketanji Brown a Supreme Court justice. Now, that benefits only Ketanji Brown and no one else. See, they don't go up to these other groups and say, why, we made this Asian person a U.S. attorney, now go vote for us. They don't do that with other groups. They don't come up to other groups and say, well, we did this symbolic gesture and that's why you got to vote for us. They come up to other groups with tangibles, something that these people can look at and they can actually quantify how it benefits them. They don't come up to them with aspirational, vicarious, live your life through someone else. They do things for the entire group when they talk to these other constituencies. If a Hispanic or an Asian or a red Indian person is put in a high office or gets some sort of high political position, the discussion is all about what they're going to do for their group. When it's a black person who gets that position, it's simply about what an inspiration they are to other black people. Black people are told that we have to settle for some bootlicking shill that we can look up to, while these other groups are told that they're going to get something that empowers and protects them. And just like that, DC gridlock only applies to traffic. No longer applies to the legislature. Hell, just look at the Crown Act. That's supposed to be a law that, if it was enacted, it would protect black people in general and black women in specific from race-based harassment based on their hair. And although the House has passed it, it's stalled in the Senate. The House passed that thing back in March. And it ain't gone anywhere since. So both Democrats and Republicans know how to work together when they want to. But you know what the killing part is for me? Even if the Crown Act had passed, the Crown Act is a poor substitute for the tangibles and protections that we're supposed to be getting. The tangibles and protections that all these other groups get without opposition. There was no filibuster by the GOP when it came to the Asian hate crime law, or this Gay Marriage Act. And these are supposed to be some of the Republicans' foundational issues, the way that they tell it. After all, the Supreme Court, which was put there by the Republicans and Mitch McConnell in particular, they were the ones saying, oh yeah, we're looking at that Dobbs decision. We think that one needs to be re-examined. That was probably a bad call. We think we might want to reverse it. But when it comes to black people, all of a sudden, there's no point in even trying to bring anything to the floor. You're going to need a 2/3 vote majority and to get past the filibuster, and well, there's nothing we can do. See, the Republicans and Democrats work together. The Democrats sit here and say that they want to pass something, but it's the Republicans' job to give them cover for the laws that they don't really want to pass. They can just blame it on the Republicans and say, well, we try, we try, but those mean old Republicans you see is those Republicans you see. Just like those racist, corrupt prosecutors who hide behind the grand juries and say, well, you know, we tried to bring a case against that cop who murdered a black person in cold blood, an unarmed black person shot him in the back or what have you. We tried to, but it was the grand jury, you see, so you can't blame us. But even for all of that, it still won't stop Biden from trying to hype up what little he claims to have done for black people as if he moved heaven and earth on our behalf when he hasn't. Everybody else is going to get tangible policies. Black people will get empty gestures. So the Democratic project to cobble together a non-black voter base is proceeding apace. These are the political gestures that are meant to get these other groups to become more open to the Democrats. And don't be surprised when you see the Democrats throwing olive branches at those Republican voters too. You know, the casual racist, read white moderates. They're going to be testing the waters to see how many socially liberal Republicans there are out there who are willing to vote for the Democrats if the Democrats appeal to them on social issues. Because both those would-be Biden Republicans and those Democrats all understand that as long as black people aren't going to get anything out of a policy, then okay, they can be persuaded to look at voting for Biden in 2 years, as long as they understand that the status quo won't change. Everything the black media told you was going to happen is happening. The people who said that Biden would do things for black people because 2020 showed him what could happen if he didn't, they look real stupid now, don't they? Biden had these fools in his pocket the moment that they voted for him. Once he won the presidency, he didn't need those black voters anymore. And just like Obama before him, Biden has spent the last 2 years going out of his way to show black people that he does not care what happens to us. And the Democratic Party as a group has been doing the same. Well, I think that come election time, We need to make it a point to return the favor. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Sakina Collins, Kimba Shakur, Rashawn Izu, Suleiman Alaji, and Cynthia Nixon. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.